Welcome back to my channel for another Hasselblad episode, and this episode is about the new Firmware 4.0.0 which Hasselblad brought to market and which enhances the capabilities of the X2D tremendously. Besides compatibility with the new Hasselblad X2D lens, the major upgrade only comes into play if you go for tethered shooting. And tethered shooting means you connect your camera with, for instance, your MacBook Pro, and then make sure that you use Hasselblad's Phocus software in order to shoot remotely in the studio. And that is something I'm going to illustrate in this video, and I will also test out the new so-called Multishot mode, and we're looking to sample images in Lightroom. Let's get started with this new Hasselblad episode. At the point in time when recording this video, when I go to the usual X System firmware website by Hasselblad, Firmware 4.0.0 is not there. The latest firmware which you find there is 3.2.0, and you find this under the X2D 100c section, of course. But if you then go into Google and type in Hasselblad X2D 100c and Firmware 4.0.0, you actually find a PDF on the Hasselblad website. And if you click that and download it, and then open it from the download section, you actually get the information you're looking for, and we'll go into that in a moment. What we also find here is actually a download link, and it's strange that Hasselblad has it here hidden in a PDF document and not on the official X firmware website where they usually post firmware updates. So under what's new, we find that there are only, but only in quote unquote, two updates here in this firmware upgrade. One is support for the new Hasselblad XCD 75p lens and the corresponding extension tube, and the other one is for the so-called 4-shot multi-shot mode, which we are going to deep dive into in this video right here. If you're not going to use tethered shooting, this update actually only brings for you support for this new 75p lens, because the 4-shot multi-shot mode can only be used in remote tethered shooting with the Phocus software from Hasselblad, which you can operate on your Mac or your MacBook or what have you. You also get the usual hint, which also applies to other cameras with multi-shot modes, that you need to keep the camera still during capture, so you will have it mounted firmly on a tripod and not go for handheld shooting. Since tethered shooting for many photographers who do operate outside in the field and let's say not in the studio, tethered shooting still is a big mystery, I thought it's time to actually provide a tutorial on how to use that, how to use the Phocus platform with the Hasselblad X camera system to do remote shooting in the studio. You can of course also do it in the field, but it involves a lot of equipment, means your MacBook, a bunch of cables, your camera, a tripod, and so on and so on. So my intention with this video is to provide the essentials on how to shoot the X camera system with the Hasselblad Phocus software, connecting the camera to a MacBook, and then using the features of this, in my opinion, absolutely brilliant platform to go for tethered shooting. And of course, it's also useful that you can charge, if you are in the studio, your MacBook, and the camera, if it is connected to the MacBook, gets charged too, so you will never run out of power. And then last but not least, if you like my content, if you follow my channel, if this is useful information to you, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because for me, that's the award for the work I'm investing here in these type of videos. My ambition still is by the end of the year to go beyond 50,000 subscribers by more than 10 million views, which I already have, but subscribers are still below 50,000, and then in the next year, hopefully piling up to 100,000 subscribers. And now let's go right into the topic. All right, I'm now here in Phocus, made by Hasselblad on my MacBook Pro. That's the software you should use for tethered shooting or remote shooting. You see on the left-hand side the live view. This is the watch we are going to shoot, and I made it a habit to always have this in a separate window. You can choose this here in the menu. You see this here. And then we have a pane in the middle, which is currently black. The images will appear there as soon as I shut them. And then on the right hand side, we have a control panel, which is very well thought through by Hasselblad. I should say the Phocus software is, in my opinion, one of the best remote shooting platforms you can have in professional photography. This will not be a tutorial on the Phocus software, so don't get me wrong, but there are lots of features, and a few of them I want to quickly mention. First of all, you have here focus peaking, which I can switch on. You see the orange pixels here. I can switch it off. We also have here special features on the lower right hand side, for instance focus bracketing, which is something I'm going to use later on. I can tweak all my parameters here, so let's shoot at an aperture of f8.0, an ISO of 100. Let's go here to single shot, not to multi at this point in time. I come to that in a moment. And since I'm an aperture priority, the camera figures out, the light metering, that it will be a 1 second exposure I'm shooting here. So let's take a shot and let's see how this looks like. Now the shot appears here in that pane which I mentioned before, and I also have it here in the preview. And let's see how this looks like. I have not done anything to focus that at this point in time. Let's go here to the magnifier. Let's have a look. Looks pinpoint sharp, looks really good to me. And of course has now the usual problem which you have in tele lens macro shootings, that the depth of field is very shallow. You see the hand here is actually very blurry and is not sharp, but other parts like the riding Norcane and Swissmate here on one of the bridges here, that's very sharp. So with f.8 I don't get that far, and it turns out even if I do this at stopping down, let's say to an f18 here, the depth of field will still not be large enough, wide enough to capture everything of that movement. So let's try this again. Let's see where the focus field is here. Let's go back into live view. So now we're in live view and here's the focus field. Let's focus again here on Norcane and Swissmate, and let's take another shot. Now stop down to f18. Exposure is much longer now, of course. 4.8 seconds was 1 second before, but now since I stopped down dramatically, it takes much longer. And here is now in play mode the image. Let's have a look. Is updating. Will take a second. Let's see. It's a lot of megapixels. Here it is. Now it's sharp. And I think the hands look good now, but if we move around here, let's stay cropped in. Let's choose the hand tool. And there are still parts of the image which are not super sharp. For instance, if you look here into that skeleton design, there is still something a layer deeper which is not sharp in the way I want it. So I will go actually for focus bracketing and then stack these images, because that's the way to get this under control. And then I can safely open the aperture wider again to an f8 or an f7 or what have you. Let's go for an f8. And let's then go for focus bracketing. So first of all, the first two test shots, let's delete them. I don't want to have them any longer. Let's move it out. Let's move it out. I don't need this. Okay, let's go back into live view. And let's go to focus bracketing. Now, first of all, let me place a focus field here at a point where I believe this is the closest to the camera. So let's say here. Okay, it's focusing. Let's crop in. Let's have a look, and you see here these spots. This is very likely dust here on the watch. They are still a bit fuzzy. So we can now with that tool in larger steps or in smaller steps adjust the focus. So let's see how this looks like. Focus here on this part. Let me place here the focus 8 on here, and I'll show you one more feature in a moment. So let's see how this gets sharper. Do you see how that point is changing? That looks already much, much better. There is, by the way, also an acoustical confirmation in terms of beeps. It will drive you nuts after a while, but I give you that sound for a moment. The faster it beeps, the better the focus sits. Look here, I think that's it. I will turn this off now in a second, because this is really killing me. So, I think that's it. That looks actually good to me. I think that's the way we should keep the focus for the time being. Let's zoom out. Let's see. And you see everything in the skeleton movement now, including the writing of Norcane and Swissmate here, is fuzzy. So at f8.0, we really have a very, very shallow depth of field here. And now we basically say on the sweep here, we want to go towards infinity. There are other options here, but that's the way I typically do it. I go for an extra small size here in terms of steps, but you have small, medium, large, extra large, and I go for extra small. And in my experience, for the few millimeters which the watch has in terms of thickness, 30 steps should do the trick for me. So let's start the sequence now, and let's get these shots done. Let's control one more time here my focus. Let's go in. I think that looks good. Let's a little bit That was too much. Now it's even better. Okay, let's go for this one here. It's really a lot of diligence which is required if you do focus bracketing in order to get the first shot right, and then the focus is moved in extra small steps towards infinity, and we will then later stack these images within Helicon Focus. So let's start the sequence. I just push the button here, and then this will kick off. You will hear the camera in the background now making the noise. It will be 30 frames, and the focus will move in extra small steps from the point where I started, which was the closest point towards the camera, towards infinity, moving the focus in extra small steps. These are the 30 images. Let me give you a flavor what focus bracketing really means. So this is the first image here, if you look at that, and we focused here at the bezel on the left hand side, and you see this is very sharp. You see all the dust here. It looks really good, but Norcane here and Swissmade is fuzzy. And if I move now through the frames, you will see how the focus moves. Let's go to the very last one. Let's see what we see here, and let's crop out here. Let's go to this one. And then you see now here, this is very deep in the movement where things are then sharp and in focus. Look here, for instance. In the very latest layers in that movement inside the watch case. And I can now stack these images together in Helicon Focus, which I will do in a moment. And then we get a final image, which is basically consisting of a stack of 30 of these frames with always an extra small step of focus shift from each frame to each other. All right, I'm now in Helicon Focus here, and here's a folder with my 30 frames, which I can choose now and basically import into Helicon Focus. Let's do this quickly. They get recognized here, and now I can go for the standard setup here, but you can play with the different rendering methods and the parameters. The standard for me typically works very well, so let's go to render and let's see how this looks like. And Helicon Focus is very special software which is made really for focus stacking. So if you have a focus bracketing sequence, you can stack the images then via Helicon Focus, and the method I've used here is the depth map, and the parameters are for the radius 8 and for the smoothing 4. So let's see how this plays out. What I can do now is I can first of all have a look at the stacked image. I do this under text and scale here, and you see this is gorgeous. Now the depth of field is really enhanced. I wanted to have that pillow on which the watch is resting in the background still having a little bit of fuzziness in it, and also towards the bezels here, and I think that's a good image. We can work with it, and I want to save it now, so I go into saving and choose here save under options, and I call this stacked 30 single frames. And I also want to go here for the DNG format, so I want to have raw format and later work with it in Lightroom. So let's just quickly save this here, and then we can close Helicon Focus, can return to the Hasselblad Focus software, and go for the multi option to see the difference. By the way, as a side remark, some of you might have seen people talking about a 400 megapixel multi-shot option. That's not there yet. If you go under type, you have only single and you have multi, which is still a 100 megapixel image. The 400 megapixel image option will come with a later firmware update. And I saw one video on YouTube, I think it was from Carl Taylor, and he had a beta version. And on the beta version, there was a third option here, which was called 6-shot. And the 6-shot option is the one which delivers you a 400 megapixel frame in the same way as you get it from the Fuji GFX series under their multi-shot option. But that's not yet officially available. And everything you read in the web about it is just wait and see, because that firmware is not officially available for us normal human beings. The next procedure will take a bit longer because the multi-shot option, of course, slows down the shooting process. So let's go here and let's switch here under type in the control pad from single to multi. And let's do the same focusing procedure as what I did for the last sequence. Let's move the focus field here to the bezel of the watch. Let the camera focus, and then let's zoom in and let's get these fuzzy points into sharp corners of dust. And we use the control pad here at the lower right hand side corner again. Let's do this. Let's see where we end. Already better. I think that's it. I go for this one here. Let's zoom out here. Let's shoot now the same focus bracketing sequence, but this time in the multi-shot mode, so that the sensor is shifted a little bit to one or the other side. It's all in 4 frames, which should improve the clarity, the color representation, and in general, the optionality you have with an image if you want to crop in by beyond 100%, let's say 200% or so. We later try this out in Lightroom. So let's go for the shooting sequence here. I started. Now let's scroll here a little bit because I want to show something which might be interesting. Let's go to the very first frame, and you see here, for instance, a little 4 in each and every frame in the upper left hand side corner, and that indicates that under multi we have 4 frames, and these 4 frames are then by the Phocus software combined into one single frame, but the basis were 4 frames, and that's what this little 4 is indicating here. What I want to do is now I want to also import them into Helicon Phocus, but that is not so straightforward, and as always in my videos I try to provide you with the most honest feedback, and will help you avoiding surprises when you try to do this by yourself. And I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. Here are the 30 frames. As I said before, these are multi-shot frames, so it's a single frame, but the basis were 4 shots taken in consecutive ways. And if I want to import them now into Helicon Phocus, unfortunately that's not working with the FFF format here in the suffix in the way the Phocus software from Hasselblad is handling them. So if I import them, drag and drop them into Helicon Phocus, I get an error message, and it says load image error, failed to create DNG file from RAW using Adobe Converter. So it seems that Adobe Converter is not yet capable of actually converting these multi-shot frames into DNG files. And what I need to do now is I need to go back into the Hasselblad Phocus software, will export these multi-shot frames in the DNG format because Phocus understands obviously what's been written in these image files, and then import the DNG files into Helicon Phocus and then get the 30 frames stacked into one single frame. What I want to do now is I will select these 30 frames. So let's go for Command and A. So they're all selected, and then let's export them into the DNG format. And here is already output preset is DNG. There is a certain naming going on. I could edit that, but I'm a little bit too lazy to do it. Let's just export it into the folder where we had the other frames, and then we have 60 frames there, the original format, the DNG format, and the 30 DNG frames. I then drag and drop into Helicon Phocus. So let's go for it. They get exported. Takes a moment. 30 frames of this size being written in a folder. My MacBook Pro is reasonably fast, but nevertheless sometimes I have to wait a little bit. That's it. The 30 frames should be now in the DNG format sitting in my folder, so I can actually import them now into Helicon Phocus. Let's hope that it works this time. Alright, you see here 30 DNG files. That's the multi-shots. Let's drag and drop them into Helicon Phocus. And this time I don't get an error message. So that looks good. Let's do the same rendering as what we did for the single shots. And let's see what happens here. And then I want to actually go into Lightroom and compare these two RAW files, the one from the 30 single shot frames with the one from the 30 multi-shot frames. And let's see if we spot differences there and if this is really an improvement. I would have been much more keen in seeing the 400 megapixel option, to be honest, but Hasselblad has not published that firmware yet, and that means we need to wait. Okay, so now I'm in Lightroom here with the two shots. On the left hand side is the stacked 30 single frames image, and on the right hand side the stacked 30 multi-shot frames image. And let's quickly recapitulate what we know about the 4-shot multi-shot mode. And the 6-shot multi-shot mode, which takes us up to 400 megapixel, is not yet implemented, but the 4-shot multi-shot mode actually is overcoming the traditional way of shooting single images where each pixel receives one level of color information. So we are talking about RGB, red, green, blue, based on the well-known Bayer pattern filter. And of course, you see on the left-hand side, this is a high-quality image, but if we compare these two images, the coloring, the tonality on the right-hand side is different. And that now results from the 4-shot multi-shot mode, where actually 4 frames are taken. And the way this is done is the sensor is shifted 1 pixel horizontally, then 1 pixel vertically, then another pixel horizontally, and finally 1 pixel vertically. And if you look at this graphic here, it takes the sensor back to its starting point. And in this way, super accurate real RGB data for each pixel can be captured, and the resolution will still be a 100 megapixel file. The file size will substantially go up, so it's in the 500 to 600 megabyte image size category, but the coloring should be actually much more accurate than what you have in single shooting. And you see it here, if you stare at these two images, they look kind of the same, but the coloring, the tonality on the right hand side brings more naturally across how this watch really looks if you expose it to light. Okay, so let's crop into these images and let's see what we get here. This is 200% too much. Let's go to 100%. And you clearly see it here. Let me put this side by side here. On the left hand side where you have the stacked image from the single shots, you have a different coloring than what you get on the right hand side. And according to what Hasselblad says about the 4-shot multi-shot, this is the more natural solution. This is the more accurate, the true coloring we have on the right hand side, because there is no interpolation going on, which typically happens if you shoot in single mode and you follow the RGB Bayer pattern results. So that is something which is of course eye-catching. In terms of sharpness, we have the same resolution here. It's 100 megapixel on both sides. Let's crop into this a little bit. You see this here, this is pinpoint sharp. By the way, I've not done any post-processing here except cropping into the image. The resolution is a little bit reduced because I wanted to have the watch really symmetrically sitting in the center, and I wanted to crop away the bezel from that soft pillow where the watch was resting on. But that's actually all I did, just image composition. Nothing else happened here, no post-processing, no sliders for sharpness, no sliders for exposure, no change of white balance. These are the images as they came out of the camera and then were processed through Phocus from Hasselblad and Helicon Focus for the stacking. And look at that. This is absolutely brilliant for product photography. And since we know now that the coloring with the 4-shot multi-shot on the right hand side even better captures the true nature of how this watch looks like, you have actually the perfect instrument in hand for product photography if you go for that macro lens, which I used on the Hasselblad X2D, which is the XCD 120mm macro lens. And that is fabulous. You know, I think this is a really good solution Hasselblad provided here. If we talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of that methodology, which by the way also is existent on the H6D, which is the camera I also have here, so the H6D 100c. And I think what Hasselblad is missing here, of course, is that you should be able to shoot just with the camera and not only in tethered shooting mode. That is something which Hasselblad should fix, but it was the case already also for the H6D, that you only could achieve these type of results by tethered shooting via Phocus software sitting on a MacBook, not even via Phocus Mobile 2 on the iPad, which would be a bit more convenient if you are shooting out in the field. And don't get me wrong, the left hand side is already a good image. I mean, if you look at that level of clarity, sharpness, crispiness, without any post-processing, I could further improve this by, you know, moving some sliders forth and back. This is already a really good result, but the right-hand side is really, if I look at my watch and expose the watch to bright light, this is how the watch looks like. This is the purple tonality these bridges have inside the watch and the bracelet has. And this is something I've not seen before. I mean, Hasselblad is famous for their natural color solution, and we all know that. We discussed this on my channel various times. But this is the next step of the evolution, which so far was only on the much more expensive H6D 400c and now is on the Hasselblad X2D. I don't think there is much more to say here. You see the beauty of these images, the possibilities you get with this new tool, and the coloring you have at your disposal now here with this 4-shot multi-shot option. And of course I'm waiting and being very keen to see how the 6-shot multi-shot option works. Hopefully Hasselblad gets out this firmware very soon. I really want to see how a 400 megapixel image looks like if it is shot with the X2D. As a last remark, because there is not that much more to add here and to contribute to the discussion, of course I tried whether new firmware is also available for my Hasselblad 907X CFV 100c, where you also find a first video on my channel already about this, let's call it the newer camera in the same family of Hasselblad cameras with the same sensor. And there is nothing out there, at least I didn't find anything. If you have found something, please drop a comment and let us know what you think. I want to conclude the video now, and I hope I demonstrated in a convincing way that on the right hand side, where I focus stacked multi-shot images, we have a more natural and even better color solution than what we already have on the single image on the left hand side. And of course, The sensor in the Hasselblad cameras, the CFV 100c, for instance, as the digital back, or the X2D, this sensor is an absolutely brilliant sensor. The only shortcoming of this sensor is a slow readout time, which typically holds me back from using electronic shutter, but it is a brilliant sensor. And with these new capabilities, and if then in the future we even have a 400 megapixel 6-shot multi-shot mode, this camera is unstoppable for product photography, for studio photography, for landscape, for what have you. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel, there's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.